I'm Denise Jorgens, Director of International House at the University of Chicago. John D. Rockefeller Jr. believed that if American and international students could live, study, and engage in multicultural programs together, they would both build friendships and global understanding. In 1932, he gave that belief life at International House at the University of Chicago, which is today one of 20 members of the International Houses Worldwide Network. Today, across the network of International Houses Worldwide, and thanks to all of you, 8,400 students and scholars are now in residence annually, representing more than 125 nationalities, of which over 700 students now receive scholarships. As director and as an International House alumna myself, I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to witness firsthand how the iHouse student life experience and our public outreach programs, including programs such as the Chicago Ensemble concert series, contribute to transforming people's lives for a better world. Alumni and other donors can ensure that International House continues to serve as host to the world. I thank you for joining us today for our Alumni Weekend at Home program. We hope to be able to welcome all of you back to campus and back to International House for next year's Alumni Weekend celebration. And now I would like to introduce Gerald Rizzer, Artistic Director of the Chicago Ensemble and a fellow alum of the University of Chicago. Jerry will begin today's special Alumni Weekend concert. Thank you. Jerry?
Thanks, Denise. We look forward to this program and many more live programs again, starting next fall. And we've had a lot of them before now, because 45 years ago, a good friend of mine and I, both of us, alumni of the music school here at the U of C, went looking for a suitable place to start a concert series. And I had certain objectives in mind, that it be a mixed ensemble, so that on one concert you might hear clarinet, on the next one you might hear oboe, and that they be Chicago area professionals to give them work, and that it be affordable prices, that it be community-based, all of which we've stuck to for this is our 44th season. So we're going to present in this virtual series some selections from past live concerts. They're recordings made in concert, but of course not live in this season of the pandemic. And I'll give you a few words of introduction for each piece that we do. Hope you enjoy it. Mozart, as we all know, was astonishingly precocious. His father paraded him around Europe to play for royalty. But as he grew up and was no longer a cute child, getting work wasn't so easy. When he was 25, he received a commission to write an opera, The Abduction from the Seraglio, to be presented in Munich. Mozart was already acquainted with the oboe player in the Munich orchestra. The oboe player was a virtuoso, so while Mozart was in Munich, he wrote a quartet for oboe and strings, and it's quite challenging for the oboe player. The opening section has two themes, but the first gets more exposure. You'll notice that we repeat this whole section, and that similar music also is heard at the end of the piece. That leaves the middle part, so-called development, and that usually has variants of the themes heard earlier. But Mozart sometimes likes to begin with a new idea, and in this case, two longer notes, second one lower than the first, predominates. This idea is passed around to the different players. Let's hear now Mozart's oboe quartet. first movement. Henri Duparc was a student of the composer César Franck, and Franck taught at the Paris Conservatory. Franck was a highly regarded teacher with very talented students. Later in the program, we'll hear a piece by another of his students, Ernest Chausson. Franck and his students were all influenced by Wagner's operas, particularly Tristan und Isolde, with its sensuous, yearning harmonies. Although Duparc lived a long life, we don't have much music from him because he was very critical of himself and destroyed a lot of his music. We have just 17 masterful art songs. One of them, Fidèle, will be the next work on today's program. Duparc set it in 1899 to a poem by Leconte de Lisle. As it happens, Duparc dedicated this song to the other student of Franck's that I mentioned, Ernest Chausson. We should have asked Michelle, why did you become a singer? After all, it's tough, and there are not that many people who commit themselves in sixth grade or whatever it is to becoming opera singers or classical art songs.
I love that question. I know we do tell people, if there's anything else that you can conceive of doing for a vocation, for a job, for a career, do the other thing, because this is really, really hard. You can only do it if it's the only thing that you should do. And you know when you get to that point, and also the stars kind of align and a path is shown to you. I came from a very simple background, a family of church musicians, amateur church musicians. And my father was a self-taught pianist and organist and had very basic skills to basically play hymns in the church. And he would volunteer to get some voices together and make a choir. And he would offer these services to Spanish churches in the Aurora area. And my family, my little brother, my mother, and my father and I would offer medleys of duets or of hymns that we would just make up ourselves and sing them in 4 parts. So I learned how to harmonize. And so I always had music in my life. I never saw it as a viable career choice. But I did take piano lessons. I started piano lessons. My family bartered with the pastor's wife for me to take piano lessons. And I started pretty young. I was about 3 years old when I started. And I remember, I remember hearing them talking about me and saying, she was saying, I think I'm afraid for her little fingers. They would say like that, but it was a very good background to have as a singer. Because I really didn't start singing. I didn't take a voice lesson until I was 23, guys. I was 23.
Oh,
I was
really?
23. Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So, and then, I had to hustle up, and, the coaches told me that that I had potential and this is worthwhile pursuit. I already had the musical knowledge and experience and aptitude to do it. And I had an unruined voice, right? That's something that you can't take for granted at the age of 23.
Well, that's relevant to the discussion about singing the right role at the right time. I've known people who had beautiful voices and were ruined by going to German opera companies and singing every night something that wasn't suitable.
Yes, or just trying to be a Broadway belter when you're 16. Right,
And
exactly. So I didn't have anything to untrain. I had been singing in choirs the whole time. And at the age of 18, I got my first professional choral job, even without ever having had a voice lesson. And I loved singing in choirs. I loved singing and saw it as just a hobby. I went away to college as an accounting major and found out that I could take voice lessons as a class. What? And it was through that teacher. She said that I had the makings of a voice major, et cetera, et cetera. I came in auditioned in Chicago and got in at the Chicago College of Performing Arts at the age of 23. And I really had great guidance. Maria Lagios, she comes to our concerts. She's a faithful friend and patron, and she's like my family now. I love you, Maria, if you're listening. And she just put me on the right path and helped me to believe in myself and to stay healthy and to bring the art that I had within me out through my voice. And the doors opened. I will say that the typical goal of an aspiring singer is to get on that opera track and to get like a young artist program, an apprenticeship at a big house. And I really did try to do that. I was coming in a little late at the game, especially for my type of voice being a lighter voice. I did try, and I got really close. I got into the finals of some big houses, and I ended up being accepted. I'm so grateful to be having gotten accepted at the Staines Institute at Ravinia. And that's where you do art song, chamber music. And it turns out that is my path. I mean, I do sing with orchestras and I love to sing with orchestras, but it does take a special, I don't know, a interest, intellect. I don't know. You have to be you have to really love art songs. So I sang, I don't know, like 9 or 10 years with the New York Festival of Song, with the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center. And that's my favorite thing to do, is like what we do at the Chicago Ensemble.
I was going to say, once in a while we give her a chance to do it here too. Walter Piston was an American composer who was born in 1894. He grew up in Boston. Like Aaron Copland and Roy Harris, Piston went as a young man to study with Nadia Boulanger in Paris. Piston was a fine craftsman. He made use of traditional forms, but not so traditional harmonies. This piano quintet, written in 1949, has an almost Brahmsian sounding first theme. Piston taught composition at Harvard, where he had many students who distinguished themselves. 3 with quite different styles were Leonard Bernstein, Elliott Carter, and Leroy Anderson. Here is Piston's Piano Quintet, first movement. I was at the University of Chicago Library, and I just picked it off the shelf under cello piano repertoire. I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard it, and it was unrecorded. That means it's a long time ago, because about everything that's been ever composed has now been recorded. But that was a long time ago, before CDs and certainly before streaming and all that. And so I got a copy of it. They had invented the Xerox machine. I copied it, took it home, and I just thought it was just a beautiful piece. And I was just surprised that it was unfamiliar to the world. Since then, of course, it has been recorded, and we've played it over many years. But it's lovely. From 1897, it then is one of his last pieces.
Well, I want to thank you for introducing me to it, because I had never heard it before.
Right, as I said, it's really not standard repertoire, although it should be. All the more so because the whole piece, which you'll hear in a minute, is I think somewhere like 8 minutes, 9 minutes long. It's not a super long sonata, so it makes a good companion piece to other music that you might put on the program.
It's also a very good opening piece for a cello recital. I've done it since you introduced it to me on several occasions with my wife playing the piano, and we've done this piece on several occasions, and it's often the first thing we'll play. I think it's a good curtain raiser.
It is. It is.
Well, in this chanson pièce, the cellist has to sit around for 4 bars, counting in 5, which is kind of a strange meter to start a piece, I think. And the cellist also has to deal with a very difficult opening of the piece, because it sits in a register of the cello that's very, very uncomfortable. At least I find it to be uncomfortable. So it starts out like... I personally, Jerry, find it a very scary opening, because
it sounded beautiful this time.
Yeah, thank you. Well, every dog can have his day, right?
Ernest Chausson, the other student of Franck's who appears on this program, turned to composition only after going to law school to please his father. His father was a prosperous building contractor who had worked with Baron Haussmann on redesigning much of Paris. At the time of Chausson's premature death, he had written some hauntingly beautiful works, such as this piece for cello and piano, composed 2 years before his death. Like other French composers of his time, he was impressed by Wagner's operas. Chausson opened his home for salons, which were attended by writers and artists and musicians. Among the musicians was Claude Debussy, whom he befriended and supported. Despite a rift that developed between the two, Debussy continued to admire Chausson's music, and he attended Chausson's funeral. So what you just heard, everybody, in the performance of the Chausson piece is from several years ago, and so that is the old cello. But the demonstration that Andy just debuted his new cello on is, of course, a different instrument, and it's
Yes.
a newly built instrument, isn't it, or at least modern?
Yes. This cello was built in New York City in 2017, and
Wow.
it's roughly modeled after Filius Andreas Guarnerius, and Filius Andreas Guarnerius was, I believe, the father of Del Gesù, who was the greatest violin maker. It was of the Guarneri family was a family of great violin makers in Cremona. This cello is modeled after that by a maker in New York. What I find so fascinating about the entire trade of violin making is that they perfected the violin in the late 1600s and the early 1700s, and they really haven't had much reason to change much about how they're doing it, which is really remarkable considering that so many things change in the world. But they got it right back in the late Renaissance, and it has not changed since.
So my question is, that being the case all the more so, why has it been that people were so anxious to get the early violins of the Italian makers rather than just imitating very well their practice and maybe doing some technological improvements based on
Well,
modern
what I what I
knowledge?
think has happened is that over the last, I don't know, 50 years or so, the the older instruments have just exploded in price where they're unaffordable to the average musician. I bet you if you talk to many players in top flight orchestras like Chicago or New York or Cleveland, and they have instruments that they've owned for many years, they would probably tell you they couldn't afford to buy the instrument if they had to now. So this,
Also, first of all, of course, there's a limited number of those still extant, but
yeah,
also collectors buy them up, right, and reduce the number that are in circulation.
collectors buy, for the most part, only instruments which are in pristine and perfect conditions because they're buying them as investments or perhaps to loan to foundations and stuff like that. So what happened
But
is that because of this incredible explosion of prices, there's been a renaissance of really fine new makers on the scene, especially in the last 20 years. And I know many of my colleagues are buying newer instruments, perhaps not selling their older ones, but certainly buying newer ones. And there have been some random sampling of people that are playing old instruments versus new instruments with blindfolds on or behind a screen, and very often it's hard to distinguish between the older and the new ones,
which is great.
which is great. Yeah.
Igor Stravinsky was a Russian composer who came to Paris a few years before the revolution at the invitation of Sergei Diaghilev. Diaghilev was his compatriot from St. Petersburg, who had created a ballet company in Paris. Not only Stravinsky, but Debussy, Ravel, Defaya, and other composers were commissioned to write ballets for Diaghilev's ballet company. Stravinsky's music for the ballets Firebird, Petrushka, and Rite of Spring are now concert favorites. But the Paris audience at the 1913 premiere of the Rite of Spring was quite displeased and in fact rioted. World War I brought about hard times for Diaghilev's company. In 1918, the end of the war, Stravinsky wrote The Soldier's Tale for a small cast of performers. Subsequently, Stravinsky was asked to transcribe The Soldier's Tale for just 3 instrumentalists, clarinet, violin, and piano. And it is that instrumentation that you are about to hear. The soldier depicted in The Soldier's Tale has not been in World War I. That would have been a very grim story. Rather, the story is a fairy tale. The soldier is on his way back to his hometown, looking forward to seeing his girlfriend. He takes his violin out of his backpack and begins to play. The devil comes along and offers to give the soldier a book that can tell the future in exchange for the soldier's violin. the violins symbolizing the soldier's soul. Alas, the book does not serve the soldier very well. He thinks he's getting home in 4 days, but it turns out to be 4 years. And the soldier returns home to find that his girlfriend has married somebody else. Dejected, he leaves the town and comes to a land where the king is trying to find someone who can cure his daughter who lies ill. Whoever succeeds will get to marry her. The soldier has managed to get his violin back from the devil by getting him drunk. So he now plays some dance tunes for the princess. She gets up to dance, and lo and behold, she is cured. The 3 dances he plays for her are a tango, a waltz, and a ragtime, all of which were very popular around 1918. Now, I must tell you that Stravinsky's portrayal of the dances is rather strange. The tune sometimes doesn't seem to go anywhere. It just circles around the same notes. Sometimes there's an extra beat, which would make it hard to dance to. Sometimes what seems to be the wrong chord is played. This then is a parody of the dances, albeit one that employs devices of melody, harmony, and rhythm that are characteristic of Stravinsky's style in other contexts as well. Here's Stravinsky's take on these dances. Brahms came to Vienna from Hamburg as a young man seeking recognition. The presentation of his piano quartet in G minor was Brahms' entree into Viennese musical society. It is uncompromisingly serious for the first three movements, but in the fourth movement, Brahms writes a gypsy-style rondo, which was certain to be a crowd pleaser. It was not just opportunism, however, that drew Brahms to writing a rousing folk-like finale. He did not always write heavy music. There is an aspect of Brahms which led him to arrange many folk melodies, to write the Liebeslieder waltzes and the Hungarian dances, to utilize a gypsy-style theme for the last movement of his violin concerto, and to hand Johann Strauss Jr. a note after hearing the Blue Danube Waltz played, saying, "I wish I had written that."
you.